My name's Henrietta Stock. I'm an engineer, and at the Carbon Trust I'm a Technology Acceleration Manager. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it means that my work focuses very much on innovative low-carbon technologies and on trying to accelerate the uptake of these into the market. And in particular, I am focused on industry, so looking at industrial technologies, at technologies for energy efficiency. And I'm working very closely with industry through the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator program to try and address some of the barriers to uptake of low-carbon technologies in industry. So the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator is a program that's really designed to bring innovative new low-carbon technologies into UK manufacturing industries to decarbonise their operations, to save them money and energy. So as a bit of context for industrial energy efficiency and for the programme, industry is responsible for around 25% of UK CO2 emissions, so it is a really big problem. It's also a problem that's quite difficult to tackle. So we've already heard that in many of the particularly medium-scale industrial sectors, the majority of the energy use is actually in those complex, sector-specific manufacturing processes. So the opportunities for these industries is not quite the same as for your typical high street business where it might be heating and lighting and so on. It's actually much more specific to the sector and to the manufacturing process. And those manufacturing processes are normally quite well established and have been established for a number of years in each industry sector. And that presents an additional challenge because processes can then be quite difficult for one company to change alone, particularly if standards or regulations have grown up around that accepted process. So there are lots of different barriers to energy efficiency in industry, and this is just a few of them. And I think some of these were mentioned earlier as well. The availability of appropriately skilled resource. So we're talking about resource that actually has the time and the skills to analyse the energy usage, the energy consumption, and identify from that actions that they can take to reduce energy consumption. That kind of resource is in really short supply. Industries, particularly in the UK, do tend to be quite lean on resource, and having people with the time and the skills to actually make those kind of insights is quite difficult. We also have a lack of innovation in industrial technology, and I think this has really grown up from the fact that many industries haven't invested over the years in new technology, in new equipment. They have a tendency to sweat the assets, and that does mean that a lot of technology development doesn't happen or doesn't happen here. There is more going on in Europe, but equipment suppliers often find it very difficult to engage with industry on this subject and on what innovations they could make and what industry is actually looking for and what it needs in terms of technology and energy efficiency. And I think one of the other key barriers is this one around investment decision making and that process within industrial companies. So there is a bit of a barrier around finance itself and getting hold of finance, but particularly when that's competing with product-related projects. So the industry is typically much more concerned with a project that's going to improve their product in some way rather than something that's just more energy efficient. So that's the context for our programme of work, and that translates into our overall aim, which is to deliver a step change reduction in carbon emissions from industrial processes. So we are quite focused on those sector-specific industrial processes, and we're looking to try and increase the uptake of innovation both in process control but also in the uptake of low-carbon technologies. And I think there are three kind of key aspects, if you like, about the accelerator, about our approach. The first of those is that we are tackling these sector-specific processes, the black boxes that haven't been looked at before through typical site surveys and so on. Tends to be because they're quite complex. They're the process, they're making the product, and normally we sort of leave them alone. We don't know how changing the operating parameters on that process necessarily influences the energy. And that's really key to understand. And if we can understand how the different ways in which we can operate the process impacts on the energy use, that's how we can identify practical and replicable and cost-effective carbon-saving opportunities that have been untapped previously. So what we're doing is really getting in-depth into that manufacturing black box. And we've actually piloted some of this work last year with 3 different industry sectors. And just going through this process of understanding energy use in manufacturing processes, identified on average 28% energy efficiency opportunities, so really quite significant. The second thing we do that's quite distinctive is actually about understanding and addressing those barriers to implementation of the opportunities. So we don't just identify them and leave them there. We're actually supporting trials and demonstrations of new technology in industry in order to de-risk that for companies. And also not only to de-risk it for the companies that are pioneering and want to try out some of these new technologies, but also in doing that to build up really credible and robust data which we can use with other companies to convince them of the business case for making changes. The third aspect that's quite distinctive about the work we're doing is we are mobilising whole sectors together to increase the implementation of opportunities. So we're working with many companies in each sector and with trade associations in order to get that engagement across the sector. And this is where we can really build capacity in industry sectors and the skills to actually help those industries respond to things like the carbon reduction commitment and other policy mechanisms, to actually have the awareness of the opportunities that are there for them to go and implement. So overall, our target for this accelerator is to deliver a carbon saving of 3 million tonnes, which is equivalent to around £500 million off the bottom line for UK industry. And our objectives translate into a 3-stage approach, which we go through with each industry sector. So there's 3 stages of work that we'll do with an industry sector. And the first of those is that one around investigating that black box, looking for the opportunities by understanding the energy use in a manufacturing process in more depth. So typically we're doing quite a lot of sub-metering actually of industry processes and talking to operators, talking to management, trying to understand how the operation impacts on the energy use. Based on that investigation, we're identifying a number of different opportunities and then looking to move some of those opportunities into the second stage of the accelerator, which is about implementation. And this is where we really try and kickstart implementation in an industry sector by demonstrating or trialling some of those technologies in industry, building up a really strong business case based on that data for the sector about the energy saving opportunity, de-risking it through our funding for those companies that are pioneering. And this is how we really kickstart the implementation and overcome some of those barriers. The third stage of the accelerator is then about replicating that across the rest of the industry sector. So once we've built up that data, we've got the business case, it's really solid, we've actually proved it with companies in the industry, we can then replicate that across the rest of the sector. So as I mentioned, we actually piloted that first stage of the work last year with 3 industry sectors. Those industry sectors were animal feed milling, asphalt manufacture, and also the plastic bottle blow moulding sector. So 3 quite different sectors. And we did identify on average around a 28% emissions reduction opportunity in those 3 sectors. We worked with trade associations. We also worked with companies across each of those sectors. The companies that I've listed here are actually those where we installed sub-metering. So we really got in-depth into that process and metered up different bits of equipment in the process line to try and understand where the energy was going. And we did that on a number of different sites in each process so that we had something that was representative of the process that's being undertaken by the whole of the sector. So our opportunities we're identifying are things which really can be replicated across the rest of the sector and with other companies in the sector as well. And some of those opportunities we identified, just as an example, in the animal feed milling industry, having that data from a number of different sites identified the fact that the different raw materials that are being used, and there's quite a range of different raw materials that can be used to make animal feed, they actually require different amounts of energy then to process. So the process consists of things like grinding and mixing and pressing the animal feed pellets. And the pressing machines are actually the majority of the energy use. So our work identified that different raw materials use different amounts of energy to process. So for example, increasing the wheat content of your feed by 20% could reduce the power use in the presses by 15%. So that's really quite significant. And that's an opportunity then to look at the raw materials and how those can be changed around to still achieve the same nutritional content, which is the target for the feed, but saves money by doing that in a way that optimises the raw materials for the process that's being undertaken. In the asphalt sector, one of the key opportunities there was actually around a cold mix product for the asphalt sector. Instead of the hot mix, the cold mix is as its name implies, it's not heated in the same way. So it's actually mixed cold and laid cold. And that can save 80% of the energy consumption from the asphalt manufacture. And this is an opportunity where the technology actually exists and it is used in other countries. But for some reason in the UK we have all these other barriers. So there's barriers around market uptake and regulations, and the fact that specifications for road surfaces have built up around our traditional hot mix product, and a cold mix product doesn't comply with that, so it can't be made by any of the asphalt companies. So there's a real opportunity there to try and tackle that market barrier and build demand for a lower carbon product. In the plastics sector, one of the key opportunities, again related to technology, is about the heating of the plastic granules before they're blown into the bottle shape. And there's a clear opportunity for technology transfer from other plastics processes. The induction heating method for heating those plastic granules is used or has been introduced into other plastics processing, such as injection moulding. That's a technology that's proven in injection moulding, and there are figures about the energy saving there. But it hasn't been done in extrusion blow moulding, which we were looking at. And there are some concerns from companies undertaking extrusion blow moulding. Well, it might not work in this particular process. We have slightly different operating parameters. So there's an opportunity to really try that out, optimise that for this particular process, and de-risk that for the companies in the sector, and get that evidence of what the energy savings could be. So those three sectors that we worked with last year have now moved into stage 2 of our accelerator, where we've defined projects or challenges to submit, or we've invited the sector to sort of submit their ideas for what they would do to address those challenges. So in animal feed milling, it was about developing an energy efficient formulation system, so a way of calculating the energy cost of different raw materials and including that when formulating the different products. There's also an opportunity there for more energy efficient press machines, which could come from other industries that are doing pressing. In the asphalt sector, there are opportunities around the development of the market for the lower temperature asphalt. There are also opportunities in the asphalt sector for things like heat recovery, which can be used the waste heat to preheat combustion air, and also implementing advanced burner control. And those are technologies which, they're not that new, but they haven't been done in this sector. And there's a lot of uncertainty and risk for the companies in this sector about actually implementing some of those and how they would really work in practice. And that's why we're issuing the challenge to the industry, say, okay, what do you need to believe in order to adopt this? And we will help to fund that and to de-risk that initial implementation. We actually expanded the scope of our work slightly on the asphalt sector and looked further upstream as well, and at the aggregate sector more broadly. And so we added in a challenge here for the sector around looking at low carbon vehicles in the quarry. where obviously the vehicle movements are quite different to the sort of thing you get on the road. And in the plastic sector, the opportunity that we've issued a challenge around is that induction barrel heating opportunity that I mentioned for the extrusion blow moulding process. So with each of these challenges, we've offered up to £250,000 in funding, or actually, in exceptional circumstances, up to £500,000 to industry, to companies in the industry, and to the technology suppliers to the industry, to try and address these challenges and to undertake projects and programs of work that will really overcome some of the uncertainties and the barriers that are stopping people from implementing what are quite good technology innovations. And what we're doing now, this year, we've got approval, if you like, to scale up the impact of what we're doing. So based on the success of those 3 initial sectors, we're scaling up our impact, and we've got a funding envelope of around £15 million for a 4-year programme to really take this out to industry more widely. So we're going to do that by having a greater impact with those existing sectors in stage 2, as I've mentioned. So disseminating some of the knowledge we've gained from looking at the industrial processes, and also supporting that implementation, kickstarting that implementation and getting that replicated across those industry sectors. Crucially though, what we're doing is really expanding the breadth to 20 further sectors, and we will look to do that first stage of investigation with those sectors over the next 2 years, so that we can take them through stage 2 and 3 and implement and replicate some of those technology opportunities over the 4-year programme. We're having a number of discussions with different industry sectors at the moment. In fact, we've recently started work with the dairy, bakeries and confectionery sectors, but we're targeting many more and have had a number of discussions with maltsters, with the textile industries, brick manufacturing, wastewater treatment, and so on. The list goes on: brewing, meat processing, laundries. We're looking for those black box processes where the energy use in those processes hasn't been very well understood in the past, and there are untapped opportunities there for energy efficiency. So I hope that that has given you a quick snapshot of our work on accelerating the uptake of low carbon technologies into industrial processes. It is a very exciting programme. We are currently ramping it up. So hopefully we're going to have that really big impact with industry and by looking at industrial processes in depth. And if you do have any questions, I'm happy to take those now.